Alright, so in this video we're going to be taking a look at adding the text to our design. We're going to be looking at adding the little graphic element here of the house, and then we're going to be taking a look at sequencing. So first step is our lettering. So we're going to come up here to the lettering and monogramming option, and then we're going to be using block 1, which is a pre-digitized font here inside Hatch. And we're going to be typing in our wording. So Pegasus Construction Services. So we got that taken care of. Pegasus Construction Services. We're going to change the height to 0.17. And then we're going to also change the lettering spacing. So we're going to come down here and you'll see lettering spacing, and I like to use 0.30. Okay, and let me show you what that looks like without that spacing. You can see the lettering actually touches, but if I change the spacing to 0.30, then you could see that the letters are just a little bit spaced apart. Now you can decide for yourself if that's something you want to do. And there's all kinds of little settings here inside Hatch that once you find a setting you like, you tend to stick with. And that's one of those settings that I personally prefer, just a touch of spacing between. So I'm going to set my S right there at the far right side. And then obviously it's too wide. So we're just going to pull that in and fine-tune exactly where the P is going to go there, and that is going to be our text. So you can see there. Now I know, having stitched this text out and this particular font out, I know that that's going to stitch out really nice. It's going to be legible, even though it's very, very tiny. Keep in mind that this is barely an eighth of an inch thick. It's an eighth of an inch is 0.125, and this is 0.17, so it's tiny. It's very, very tiny, but it's going to stitch out just fine. Well, we're going to see that here a little bit later on. Now, there are a couple other things to talk about as far as small lettering goes. I do want to show you something, so we're going to come over here to the stitching tab. There is an option here to turn off the pull compensation entirely. So if I do that, watch how my lettering will change. Turn off pull compensation and see the difference. So sometimes that can be helpful to us. So if we're not happy with the way the lettering looks, you think it's all kind of mashed together because it's so tiny, sometimes that can help us by turning off the pull compensation. Now in this case, I'm pretty certain that this is going to stitch out just perfectly fine, just the way it is. It's going to be perfectly legible. But if you were concerned about that, that might be another step to take. The other thing that you could do is, and it's generally recommended with small lettering, is to use a 60 weight thread, because that is a thinner thread and can yield better results, more crisp details with that thinner thread. Now when you're using 60 weight thread, it's generally recommended you use a 65 needle, but that's not entirely necessary. I don't use any special needle with a 60 weight thread. I just use the same needles I use for everything else, and it works just fine. One other consideration though, when we are using 60 weight thread, I do want to talk about is come over here to the fill tab, let's see here. Yes, it would be the fill tab, yes. So over here at the fill tab, we have this option here where we can use the auto spacing feature, or we can choose manual. And notice the difference there. So we have the stitches look like this, and we switch over to manual stitches, then it looks like that. Okay. If we go to the design tab here, the number of stitches that we have is 4,776 when we're using the auto spacing, but when we switch to manual, you'll see that that stitch count rises because our density rose for this text. Again, those are settings that you just play with, stitch some things out, and see what settings that you like depending on what thread weight you're using. So those are different things that you can experiment with. All right, so now I want to talk about one other topic when we're digitizing for caps. So as a general rule, we want to digitize caps from the center out and from the bottom up. Okay, so in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to stitch out this lower half of the Pegasus and from the bottom up, and then we're going to come into our text. That will kind of be the next step here. But right now, our text, because we use the lettering function, starts here at the right and comes all the way here to the left. And I don't want to do that. I want to start at the center and stitch out the text backwards, come back to center, and then stitch it out this way. Is that entirely necessary? Probably not. I'll be honest with you. It's probably not. We'll probably still get good results. But I would just feel more comfortable if we start from the center and work our way out, come back to the center and work our way out, because again, that is the general rule of thumb when you're creating cap designs, and it's pretty simple to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our text, which is one piece at this point. We're going to go to our editing objects option, and we're going to choose the break apart option. And when we do that, then we get individual words. We need individual letters. So we're going to select everything again, choose break apart again, and now we have individual letters. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to select our letter R and hold the control key down and select T and S, and each successive letter going from center to the outside on the left side here. So you see how I'm just holding my control key down and just clicking on every letter. We do need to click on each letter individually because we're going to use this option, sequence by selection. So let's open up our sequence docker here, and you can see how this currently stitches, right, from left to right. But now we're going to flip-flop that by choosing sequence by selection. So it's going to remember how I selected each one of those objects and sequence accordingly. And now you can see that everything has been flip-flopped. Okay? And that's exactly what we want it to do. All right. So now I think is a good time to talk about thread trims. Okay? So you can see currently we're at 12 thread trims. Okay, that's not very production friendly. So now we need to talk about sequencing and thread trims. Now we are going to come back and do that little graphic for the house, but I think right now let's talk about sequencing and thread trims. So what I want to do is I first want the lower part of the Pegasus to stitch first. And in fact, that is the number one stitch position. Now we can stitch the tail, and then we can stitch the hoof. That is the order that I think I want to do those things in. And then it's going to skip from this hoof over to here. And we're going to have this piece stitched first, then this piece, then this piece. So in terms of sequencing, this bottom section, we are where we want to be. Okay? So I am happy with that. Then we're going to stitch out the top half of the Pegasus. Then we're stitching out the horn, stitching out the ear, stitching out the mane. Then we're going to start right here. We're going to stitch out the first part of the wing, the next part of the wing, and then these parts of the wing there. I am going to change this because what I do want is I do want my text to stitch out in between before I do the top. Because remember, we're stitching for a cap, so generally speaking, I'm going to work from the bottom up. So let's go ahead and select all of my text pieces, and let's just reposition that to where they need to be. So we are going to do that right up here. I'm going to think here for a second. Let's make sure that that is where we want. So yes. So right after the hoofs here, then we're going to start with our text, correct. And then after our text, we're going to do the body, horn, ear, mane, and the wing pieces. Yes. Okay. So we're good there. Now notice here, it still says we have 12 thread trims. Okay, so that is definitely an issue. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the top half of my design, and I want to choose this option. It's called Apply Closest Join, and I want to see if that has any impact with my thread trims. So Apply Closest Join, and you can see it took care of one thread trim. So that's not super helpful, but we did get that taken care of. And then down here, we'll do the bottom half of our design, and we'll try the same thing. See if this has any impact. We'll try Apply Closest Join. And it too took away one thread trim, so that's good. And then we will go ahead and select this half of the text and choose that option again, Apply Closest Join. We had no impact there whatsoever. And then we'll do this side and do it again. And again, we have no impact on our thread trims. Well, 10 thread trims for this design is not highly desirable. That's not very production friendly. Okay, so if we're working on a home embroidery machine that doesn't have automatic thread trims, we'd have to come to the machine 10 times, or we would have 10 thread jumps that we would then have to go back and cut manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at if there's any way to minimize the number of thread trims. So first of all, we'll turn off True View, T key on our keyboard, and let's begin taking and dissecting and looking at all the various thread trims. Okay, so the first piece to stitch is the horse, then it's going to stitch the tail, and you notice that there is no thread trim between the two. Okay, but there is a thread trim between this part of the tail and this part of the hoof. Okay, that's pretty well unavoidable. All right, but what we can do is we can eliminate this thread trim, because we can come over here to Object Properties and we can actually go to Stitching and we can turn off the automatic thread trim. Okay, so you see the automatic thread trim is turned on if the next connector is a certain distance away. So, but if we turn that off, you'll see that little triangular icon. That is indicating a thread trim. So if we turn that off, then we're going to get a thread jump. If I turn True View on, you can see I would prefer to have that thread jump, because I can come with my scissors and tweezers and nip that little thread jump really easily. So I would prefer to do that from a production standpoint. So we're going to go ahead and go that route. Let's turn True View off here for a second. Now, the next thread jump it's doing is from this hoof to this hoof, okay, to this cluster. And so what we're going to say is we're going to say that one's okay, because that's kind of, again, unavoidable. And then we have a thread trim from this cluster to our R, which again, that's unavoidable. Now, this is an option that we have. From our letter C, we could eliminate the thread trim between this word and this word. We'll get a little thread jump. So we could turn that off. And you see now we have a little thread jump. Okay, and then we have a similar situation over here from N to S, and we can turn that off as well. And again, we'll have a little thread jump that we would go back and trim. Then next, we have the letter S, which has a thread trim because it's going from there to the horse body. Okay, and that we're gonna call that acceptable because it's unavoidable. Now what we want to do is look up here. Now you can see up here there are no thread trims up here. So this part's all good. Now again, we have a little thread jump there because we choose that Apply Closest Join. So we have a little thread jump there. And then we also have a thread jump from there to there. So what we can do again is select this, and we can turn off that thread trim, and we'll have a thread jump instead. Now what we could do is, you see where the connector is there. So this piece, so we're stitching this, and then we're jumping to this. Okay, but so I'm going to just change the order a little bit to make a little bit more sense. Now you see where this connector is right here, right? So what we are going to do here is let's change where this design actually starts. So let's just move that up there, and now you can see that the connector moved up there. It's a little bit shorter distance, I think. Okay, and so we'll move on here. Let's take a look at this one and see where it starts and stops. So that looks pretty good. That looks like it's doing what it's supposed to. And then lastly, let's look at this one. This one is starting right here and ending right here, which is okay, but I'm just going to move my ending point down here. It really doesn't matter all that significantly. Okay, so now you can see up here all of this. So we're going to start here on the horse, move into all these details, no thread trims, no thread trims, no thread trims, all the way to here, and that is the last uh, the last item to be stitched, and so therefore there is going to be a thread trim there, and so you can see all in we have 7 thread trims. Okay, and so that's really, we've minimized the number of thread trims that we can possibly have in this particular design, so with the way we've digitized it. Okay, so that takes care of all the sequencing and all the thread trims. So now let's go ahead and bring up our artwork, and we'll have to take a look at how do we add our house elements. Now, one of the things that is a little bit comes with knowledge of embroidery and digitizing is that these elements are extremely tiny. So to represent these elements in thread is very complicated because they're so tiny. So this is where we kind of have to use our artistic skills and decide exactly what we want to do. So what we're going to do here, and this again, each person would probably handle things differently. So I'm just going to show you how I would take care of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the digitized open shape, and I'm going to choose the single run option here. And so for my window, I'm going to click, click, come over here, click, and come back here. Okay, just like that. So it's just one object, and that is going to become my window there. Okay, now for this, for my little roof here, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try digitize blocks for this one. And so we're going to use a satin stitch, and we're left clicking all these points because all we're dealing with is straight lines. So we're able to do that. So we can come all the way down here, right? Because it's all straight lines. Here I kind of put in this intermediary one, and I really wouldn't have had to do that. Whoa, look at there. So that that is become our satin stitch. Now let's go to True View and take a look at that. And that is because we have outline. I'm sorry. So we don't want an outline. We want a fill, and we do want that to be satin fill. And we do have to modify our stitch angles. Okay, so we're going to start here. See if we can't make our stitch angles a little bit better and see what that looks like. Okay, I'm not hating that. That doesn't look terrible, although maybe down here, I don't know. I tell you what, let's see if we can modify that a little bit. See what we got here. Let's see if we can change that stitch angle. And I just want to see if we can get that a little bit cleaner. Okay, I think I'm happy with that over there. So yes, so I think that is going to work for me. Okay, so there you can see obviously that we went with the satin fill there. Now, if I'm not happy with how wide that is, I could try, and this is something that we're probably going to have to stitch out and see, you know, how that works out. I'm going to just go ahead and delete that node. and delete this one too. We don't need either one of those. So I'm just making this just a little bit thinner. Just because I think that might make it look a little bit better. But again, that could be fine-tuned once we stitch it out and really take a look at it. Okay, so that takes care of those elements, and you could see we do have one additional thread trim. We had 7, but now we have 8, so we do have one additional thread trim there. So now we're going to go ahead and add this. So we're going to go back to the Digitize Open Shapes. Again, we're just going to be doing a single run stitch here because those design elements are just so tiny, you just wouldn't see that anyhow. Okay, so that takes care of that. And then what are we going to do over here? So for all of this, we're going to digitize an open shape. So you can see here, we're just kind of selecting these points. But you can see how I'm kind of backtracking back over some of what I've already stitched. See, I've stitched there, and then I'm coming down here, and I'm coming over here, stitching back up. Then I'm coming back this way, and we're going to call that good. Okay? So those are the little design elements there. Okay? And then for this, I'm going to click on Digitize Blocks, and we're just going to digitize this. Again, I'm not sure exactly what I did there. So we want this to be a fill, not an outline, and then we're going to change our stitch angle to be this direction. Okay, now this little piece, we're not even going to concern ourselves with that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and minimize this. And that is basically what our artwork is going to look like. Now you can see now we have 9 thread trims. Okay, so let's look at those thread trims. I just want to see if there's anything I think I can do. So when this piece of the wing finishes, there's a thread trim, and then the next piece that is stitching is the windows. So it's going to trim it off there, jump to the window. There is no thread trim between the window and the roof. And then here, there is a thread trim. There is a thread trim going from this object to the next. And that is actually something that we could probably modify. Trying to think how we could do this. Yes, so that is something that we could modify. So let's try it. Let's do this. So just to eliminate that one thread trim, I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to come back in here to Digitize Open Shape. We're doing a single run stitch, but if I come down and then back, okay, and then go ahead and hit enter. Now this, we have to move up in order, and now you can see that we no longer have that thread trim there. Okay, so we're stitching, we're going from the wing where we do have a thread trim to the window, to the roof, to the little design element there, to the hook, and to our little satin stitch counterweight for the crane type situation. Okay, so there we go. So now we have 8 thread trims. And while that's not necessarily great, because we do have all those thread trims, we've minimized as much as we possibly can at that point. Now, this is pretty true to the original artwork here, as you could see, but I might just come in here, just because I think it'll look a little bit better, if we just had a tiny bit of spacing, something like that. We do have to, sometimes we do have to wait for the redraw to catch up with us. We hit the up and down arrows a little bit too much, and it goes kind of wacky. And then it'll be interesting to see in real life how much space there is between this roof and this design element. Okay, so we'll just have to stitch it out and see. But there you go. That is really all there is to it. So actually we somehow saved us a trim. So now we have 8 thread trims. I don't know how we did that. But at any rate, that's what it's going to look like there. So when we get done, we got to nip this one, nip this one, nip this one, and nip that one. But that eliminates all those extra thread trims. And I, you know, like I said, we'll probably clean this design up anyhow. So I would rather do that than take the time to slow the machine down, make the thread trim, speed the machine back up, and start all over again. Okay? So that's it for this video, and I hope you learned something about the process. And then, so now the next step, obviously, is in the third video, we're actually going to stitch this out and then see what the final result looks like once it's all stitched out, and see if there's anything that we need to modify. Okay, so thanks for watching, and definitely check out the next video on where we're going to actually take this to the machine and get it stitched out.